back to the third hour of our program. The Bioneers Conference, which I have participated with on and off over many, many years, many decades actually, is this weekend, May 13th through the 15th. Bioneers.org, of course, is the website. And one of their speakers is going to be Clayton Thomas-Muller. He is the senior campaign specialist at 350.org. Twitter handle is Clayton or at 350 Canada or at Bioneers. Clayton, welcome to the program. Tell us about this Winter Spirit of Witigo.
Yeah, well, you know, that's the title of the presentation I'll be giving at this weekend's Bioneers Conference. And for the listeners, you know, I'm really happy to speak to y'all today. My name's Clay. I come from Canada. I'm an Indigenous man from the Cree Nation. And in our cosmology, you know, there's a story where you're not supposed to go outside during the winter when the snow is flying sideways, because that's when the winter spirit comes out and they can get you. And the winter spirit represents this kind of untameable, insatiable, cannibalistic hunger. You know, the kind of hunger that can only happen in our long, dark winter nights here in Canada. And so, you know, I'm going to be talking a little bit about that cosmology from our people and how that's a broader metaphor, you know, for the incredible challenges that we currently face as humanity, you know, dealing with this predatorial, capitalist economic paradigm that we're living in right now.
Back in 1995, I was writing a book on the fate and future of oil and climate and all that kind of stuff. It was titled The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, which is oil, basically. And I went out to the University of California at Davis and interviewed Jack Forbes, Dr. Jack Forbes. He was a professor of Native American Studies there, Native American himself. And he told me this story, and I thought it was Lakota, but he said that there was this a cultural mental illness. He called it Wetico. Wetiko, and he said that it was brought by the Europeans to this continent, and that basically what it meant was a person who was a cannibal, who ate the spirit of others, who ate the lives of others. He said you could probably call it materialistic greed today, but it was recognized pretty universally by native peoples across this continent. And it confronted them with, you know, three terrible choices when Europeans came to destroy them and steal their land, which was either, you know, fight and probably die because of the superior technology, run, although eventually you'll run out of places to run to, or become like them and infect yourself with this cultural mental illness. Is this the same sort of thing that you're talking about? And is this a universal understanding among Indigenous and Aboriginal people?
Well, I think there's a lot of shared, you know, values and world and cosmovision, you know, between, you know, the incredible diversity of Indigenous peoples across Mother Earth, and certainly here in Turtle Island. And you know, I too have heard many stories about the cannibal spirit, or, you know, the Witigo. The story you're sharing does remind me of something that I've heard along the way as well. I can only speak, though, to the perspective that I'm sharing, where I come from, and, you know, like back home up north, you know, the Witigo, it was something that existed before Munias came here to our lands, you know, before the arrival of European colonizers. And but, you know, I think that it's very accurate, though, to compare, you know, that predatorial nature of that spirit, you know, to, you know, this sickness of greed, really, that humanity is collectively going through. And of course, that empty space inside that people are trying to fill with consumerism, of course, was created by a disconnection to the sacredness of nature, of Mother Earth, you know. And so a lot of what I'm going to be sharing about at the conference is really just, you know, affirming what Indigenous peoples have been saying for, you know, since colonization started, leading up to the, you know, existential threat of climate change that we're currently facing. And that is that there's a way to take care of our land and we've been here for thousands of years observing on how best to do that and show up and play our part in the circle of life. And I think now more than ever, as we face the triple threat of global pandemic, economic recession at a scale that we've never seen, and of course, the existential threat of climate change, I think we're going to need Indigenous peoples' traditional ecological knowledge, as well as, the very young Western science, and some good old-fashioned faith to get through this process that we're all going through in terms of building the biggest social movement in the history of humankind to deal with these issues.
I absolutely agree. If I could put on a sociologist's hat, I'm not one, but
Please.
pretend I'm one, or
Yeah.
maybe even a cultural psychologist. I find it fascinating that, there is this cultural mental illness. It's embedded in all of us, the potential for it, of greed. Greed that can become so overwhelming that a greedy person is willing to actually destroy the lives of other people, even kill other people to get what they have or to accomplish what they want. And that your people, the Cree people, had developed a kind of an epistemology around this, a story around this, that it was the result of somebody going outside in winter when the snow was blowing sideways. And that's so cool. It's like, okay, that could happen to anybody, right? And it might happen, you might have to do that at some point. And oh my God, now is it? But it's a way. Tell me if my understanding of this is correct.
Yeah.
It's a way of identifying people who are infected with greed, who may be acting out that greed, and maybe there's a better word for it, but I'll toss that to you, and identifying it in a way that is not particularly judgmental. It doesn't say, oh, you were born bad, or you're a terrible person, or whatever. It's like, oh, you had the misfortune of having to go outside when the snow was going sideways. And so you can then deal with it in a cultural context that's not judgmental, but is still dealing with it. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think that like on a very direct family level, there's a story about my late great grandfather, and he battled a Witigo in real life. And when he fought that Witigo, he was a young man, and he was out on a hunt, and he was going by an island, and he got pulled to the island, his canoe, by a force. And when he got to the shore, there was a man there that had no lips and no fingertips. He had eaten them. And he tried to shoot him, but the gun jammed, and he had to fight him with his hands and his gun. And he did win, that battle, but he became so ill for the rest of the summer, and his hair turned completely white. And so there's both a physical, I think, like I hear what you're saying, like Indigenous peoples in our languages, they're polyamorphic, they're non-written. Our history is oral history. It passes through storytelling. And I think there is, in Indigenous cosmology, like a usefulness in that context in terms of the transmission of knowledge and information and, safety and stuff,
and
where
there's a
a lot of the
dimension
old...
to it.
But there's a spiritual dimension to it, and also just straight up reality. The world is much, much wider and deeper than, what we see in Western media.
Right, absolutely. I'm totally with you. We're talking with Clayton Thomas-Muller, who is the senior campaign specialist at 350.org, and will be speaking this weekend at the Bioneers Conference, a member of the Cree Nation in Canada. Clay, we're running out of time here, but last question. How can we best incorporate something analogous to this understanding that greed is a cultural mental illness, that it should be treated, that people who have this, I'm thinking of some of the billionaires among us, frankly, and some of the politicians. How can Western society, for lack of a better phrase, create or invent a cultural story that allows us to deal with this? Or do we already have it? We just need to start condemning greed.
Well, I think that a lot of things do exist already, and there's no need to create the wheel. And there are rich and powerful, bioregionally rooted cultures that provide pathways into the future from lessons learned from the past. And I think that, we face a moral crisis in our political, ecosystem. And, when you got people like Elon Musk, the son of a apartheid miner, or like a jeweled miner owner or whatever, I don't know, like a bajillionaire father, is like the most famous and richest person in the United States. Like, there's a big problem there. Dude just bought Twitter when he said he was going to pay the $6 billion to solve world hunger, and then didn't solve world hunger and bought Twitter. It's like we're in a real messed up state of affairs, and I don't really waste my time focused on those with privilege and power. Instead, I use my time and the voice that Creator gave me to try and activate and inspire and support other people whose liberation struggle is tied in with my own. And at the end of the day, the solution to climate change is the localization of power in the interest of globalizing justice. And so whatever the solutions are, they must be locally driven through community self-determination.
Brilliantly said. Clayton Thomas-Muller, Senior Campaign Specialist at 350.org. You'll be able to see him at Bioneers.org this weekend. Thank you, Clay.
Thank you so much.
Great talking with you.